It now gives me great pleasure to introduce James Espy. So James is a software tester currently making life easier for tradies as the engineering manager at Fergus. He is also the publisher of PyMail, a bi-weekly software testing newsletter, and he also posts cartoons often on Twitter, often involving his nipples. So if you're not yet on Twitter and you've been waiting for the sign that maybe now you should get on, cartoons about James's nipples is, if that doesn't get you on, then on, off, then I don't know what will. Today, though, he's here to spill the beans on the secret ingredients to progress your testing career. Please join me in welcoming James Espy.
Testing.
Yep.
The thing works. Great. All right. So I'm told you should never start a conference talk with an apology. Sorry, but I'm going to. So we've been waiting for this conference for a long time, right? And it's shifted dates, and finally we're here, and I'm very excited to be here. It's also my son's birthday today. So after we've had lunch, I'm not sticking around. I'm whiskering off to Auckland, to Tauranga, sorry. I keep forgetting I live in Tauranga now. To spend time with him, because as much as I love you people, I love him more than you. I hope that's okay. But I do love connecting with people, so grab me at lunchtime if you want to, and if you don't get a chance, please just add me on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn user. Just don't tell too many people, but I do quite like LinkedIn, so I'm quite happy to connect with you on there. Do say that you met or that you're from NZ Testing Conference though, so I don't send you my usual cut and paste reply. Okay, cool. So my name's James. I am an engineering manager at a company called Fergus. Fergus is a sponsor of today's conference, which I'm very proud of. I'm proud to work at Fergus. It's a great company. It's great people. We build a platform for tradies, for plumbers and electricians to manage their business, and we do a great job of it. It's really nice to work for a company that makes a material difference in people's lives. Our job means that tradies can spend more time on the tools and less time trying to figure out invoicing and all that other yucky, less interesting stuff. And we are hiring too, so we really need a CTO actually. If there's anyone out there that wants to have a go at being a CTO, then sorted. You're hired. Thank you. All right. One thing that probably not too many people know about me is that I like to cook. Now, I need to be clear. Like to cook is not the same as good at cooking. But I think I get by, right? I do okay. I'm going to show you a couple of photos of meals that I have cooked. Here's the first one. Thank you. Now look, this is this is how I used to cook 20 years ago when I was a student, right? Cheap, easy, not much in the way of nutritional value, not particularly appetizing, not particularly delicious. Here's something I cooked more recently. Okay, now I did send you the wrong slides. This is so embarrassing. So complete transparency, this is actually a photo from the Nadia Lim cookbook. But I have cooked this meal, it's just the photo didn't quite come out the same. But for the purposes of today, let's assume that I made that, all right? The point here is this. Over, a period of 20 years, I've learned some things about making food. The picture on the right looks a lot more appetizing, yes? And as clearly there's some fresh vegetables, there's some protein, there's some spices, there's some sauce. That's going to be a lot more nutritious and delicious than the meal on the left. Now, the meal on the left serves its purpose. It stops me from being hungry. And I could have spent the last 20 years having instant noodles for lunch and for dinner every day. I would be a pretty sad individual, though, if I'd done that. And I would probably not be very healthy. The reason I bring this up is I spend a bit of time doing test coaching and talking to other people in the industry about challenges they're facing as testers. And I have come across people who I think of as instant noodle testers. They spend an entire career, 20, 30 years, marking test cases as passed or failed, checking off acceptance criteria, and I'm falling asleep just talking about that. It's not very interesting, it's not very nutritious, it's not very delicious, and it doesn't add a lot of value, and you certainly don't grow with that sort of career. So I'm going to talk to you about some things I've learned, some things I think have helped people to move away, to help grow their careers. And I'm going to tangentially relate it to food because I like food. So how do you cook up a great tester? All right, number one. This is the sort of Twitter content you get, by the way, maybe sans shirt. So ingredients don't mean anything by themselves. I like to cook nachos. Anyone like nachos?
Yes.
Yeah. Pretty easy to cook, pretty delicious. Meat, chips, cheese, beans, tomatoes, whatever you've got. To me, sour cream is the differentiator. Sour cream is what makes nachos extra delicious. I don't know what it is, it's just that layer of fat that kind of mixes through, cuts through the spices. If I'm making nachos, I will make the trip to the supermarket to make sure there's sour cream to go with it. I made nachos for my family one night, and as I was cleaning up, there was a pot of sour cream that had like a spoon of sour cream left in it. You know, not enough that it was worth keeping, enough that I felt bad throwing it away. So I just thought, no one's looking. I like sour cream. Has anyone tried plain sour cream? It's revolting. Because sour cream by itself is terrible. It only makes sense in the context of another dish with the other ingredients that you're eating it with. Fish sauce is another one. Like if you cook Thai or Vietnamese food, fish sauce goes in everything. Fish sauce by itself is disgusting. But it makes a dish, right? You can't cook a lot of things without it. My point is this: a meal is not the sum of its ingredients. The context of the ingredients matters. Has anyone ever seen something like this? I finished testing, 188 cases passed, 12 failed. That by itself is meaningless, right? What? So what? What? Okay, 12 failed. What 12? What do they mean? Are they significant? Why did they fail? Have they failed before? If we run it again, will they fail again? What do the 188 that passed mean? Do they have any significance? It's just data and it's not useful. So what is? If we're reporting on testing, it's important to think about the value the stuff has for the business. A few years ago, here in Wellington, not here, somewhere in Wellington, there was a presentation by Moss Nye, and if you follow anyone in testing, Moss is one of the best people to follow. They're amazing. Their presentation was called Test Reporting in the Hallway. There's not a recording of it as far as I know, but there's a link to the slides from that presentation. And they gave a great model of test reporting that I still use today, although I've kind of butchered together my own version of it. And it goes something like this. Take a bunch of testing notes and then summarize those notes under the following headings. So what went well? Warnings or things of concern that you found? What are the questions that you have? And what are the problems or bugs? And what's really important here is not just listing off findings, but why we feel that way and what's important with these findings. If you found something confusing, why it's confusing and why that matters for your users. If you have a question, why that question needs answering. If you found a bug, what the impact of that bug is and why it might matter to your end users or why it might not, right? Because sometimes can ship a bug to production intentionally and come back and fix it later. That can be okay. We exponentially increase our value as testers if we stop thinking about just passes and fails and start thinking about the business value of what it is we're doing. That's number one. Number two, learn about your stakeholders. Come on, that was supposed to be a funny joke. I know, I'm sorry. When I cook a meal, I'm not just cooking for me most of the time. There are other stakeholders in play. There's a meal. So if I'm cooking for my son, he doesn't eat potatoes. That makes things hard in my house. My wife only likes her meals to be healthy, so that's a factor in what I decide to cook. Me, if I have too much dairy, I have to sleep on the couch, so that's a factor too. Who else have I got here? If my dad's coming for dinner, he's a classic boomer, no spice on my food. So, if he's feeling adventurous, maybe some salt. So we take that into account. We have a neighbour who's vegan. If they come for dinner, that matters. If my boss comes for dinner, we have to make sure the wine matches the food. My boss doesn't come for dinner. That's made up. The point is, all these different stakeholders have opinions and things they value and things that matter, and those come into play when I'm deciding what to cook. The same thing applies to quality and perceptions of quality. What do I mean by that? So, quality means different things to different people. For an engineer, code readability, code maintainability, really important, right? That's probably less important to someone like a product manager who, cares a lot about getting features shipped quickly and validating user feedback. To your design team, they probably have different things that are important to them, like usability and consistency. Who else works for an engineering company? Your support team. So things like documentation and supportability, probably really important quality criteria to them. Your shareholders. Does the thing we're making make money? That's probably their number one quality criteria. And let's not forget the customer, probably the most important one. Does the thing do what I need it to do? There's a lady called Anne-Marie Charrett who does a thing called a quality workshop. If you follow anyone in testing, Anne-Marie Charrett is the person you need to be following. She's amazing. And the point of that workshop is that quality means different things to different people, and as testers, our role is to bring those perspectives together and try and make sense of them. As an example, we put together a hack to quickly solve a problem that might meet our product manager's definition of quality because it gets the thing out in front of users faster. But to our engineer, we had to build some bad code, we've built some technical debt that's not really maintainable, and so it's of poor quality, and so we need to balance those things out and sort of figure out where the lines are and find a meeting of the minds there. And doing that means learning about things that aren't just testing. A little survey. How many of you, this is your first time at a testing event, like a testing conference? Round of applause for these people, please. All right, it's great to have you here, and believe me, you need to be part of these events, right? Because it's great to connect with other testers and see what's happening in the industry and all that stuff. How many of you go to other events, developer conferences, UX meetups, product meetups, that sort of thing? Some? Good. Excellent. Because that, to me, is the thing that we must be doing. one of my biggest frustrations in working with testers is testers that are insulated in their community, only attend testing events, only engage with other people in the testing community and don't go beyond those borders, because to be great at testing, we need to learn about these other disciplines we are working with. So and practically right now, like Product Tank meetups are great. UX meetups are great. There's developer conferences that are happening. If you're in Auckland, I think this time next week is AppSec NZ. Must get along to that if you can, and just broaden the horizons. So to be great testers, we need to engage with stuff beyond the borders of our own discipline. Okay. I'll tell you a story, and you may have, has anyone heard of the pot roast theory? Some people have. Apologies if you've heard it before, but I'll spell it out. So the story goes like this. There's a young woman who is cooking a meal for her friends. She's cooking a pot roast. And she rings up her mum and she says, "Mum, I'm making a pot roast for some people. Can you send me the family recipe?" And she does. And the recipe goes like this. Cut the pot roast in half, put the first half in the pot, cook it, put it somewhere to stay warm, put the second half of the pot roast in the pot, cook it, and then put it all together. And she says, "Mum, this is great, thank you, but can you tell me why we cut the pot roast in half and do it in two halves?" Mum says, "I don't know, I got the recipe from my mother, you should ask her." So the young woman rings up her grandmother, says, "Grandma, I've got the pot roast recipe, I cooked it, it's great, but I'd love to know what's the purpose, why do we cut it in half before we cook it?" Grandma says, "I don't know, I got it from my mother, why don't you ask her?" So she rings up, the Shady Oaks rest home, says, "Can I speak to my great-grandma, please?" "Great-grandma, why do we cut the pot roast in half before we cook it?" Great-grandma says, "Well, I got the recipe from my mother. And my mother cut the pot roast in half because the whole thing wouldn't fit in our pot." And that's where the story ends, but I'm going to add to it because I hope what happened is that the young woman then said, "Well, I've got a big enough pot now, I can roast the whole thing at once and, save an hour and a half of cooking time." In other words, she found a problem with the system and made a fix. As testers, we're tasked with finding bugs, and finding bugs in our product is good, and finding bugs in our product reduces the risk to the business or the project, and hopefully you're all familiar with that concept. About this time last year, a lady called Micah Brinkhoff, who is an amazing tester, and if you follow anyone in testing, you must follow Micah Brinkhoff. Her blog post was she introduced this concept called organizational bugs, which just set a light on for me, right? Organizational bugs. Bugs in the systems and process we have that affect the quality of our product. And Cammy's actually already talked about some of the examples of those, feedback loops, how quickly we're deploying our software, that sort of thing. It might be, one example I've seen is, a testing team that sits by themselves in the office and doesn't engage with anyone. That, to me, is not a great way to do testing. I know context applies and there might be reasons for that, but I would see that as an organizational bug. How quickly we're deploying software. We talk a lot about shift left, and I know that's kind of a loaded term and some people don't like it, but one thing that's happened to me is when I found out my team were having a planning meeting for a new feature we were building, and no one from testing was invited to that meeting. And I had to knock on the door and say, I should be a part of this, and go and sit down and, change that process. And that was scary, but it was good and it made things better. Finding organizational bugs or areas to improve can reduce the number of bugs in the product, and it can reduce the time taken to find or remedy bugs. So one thing we must do if we want our careers to grow is to start looking for these organisational bugs. So, don't be an instant noodle tester. Information over data. Consider the business value of what it is you're testing and report on that. Go beyond just testing. Start learning about development, product, all the other disciplines that we have to interact with. And start learning and thinking about organisational bugs and how we fix those. And that's what I got. Thank you. By the way, if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, please do. It's one of my favourite things to do. As I said, I love talking about testing. It makes me super fun at parties. But I'll send you the stuff I've been doing every couple of weeks. And follow us on YouTube as well. Sorry, go.
No,
throw the box.
Absolutely, yeah. No, absolutely, and he has competitions and stuff, or like he'll have little code snippets, and it's like find the bug. And maybe I'm not great at parties either because I find that a lot of fun.
It means you are great at parties.
Oh, it means I am excellent. And then he sends stickers sometimes if you do really well.
Yes.
Or maybe that was just me because I'm.
No, I did. Yeah.
Cool. So, as you can see, I'm not great at throwing this, but I'll have another go. Who has a question? There's one. All right. Oh, gosh. All right. Heads up, everyone between me and there, because this is coming and I don't know where it's going to land. Put your coffees away. Yes.
How do you translate all that into how you train and coach new people to make tests?
Sorry, say again. I think you need.
Translate all of those things into how you coach new people to be testers.
How you coach. So how do you translate all that into how you coach new people to be testers? I think for me, so I've got a new tester just started. So that's a good question. For me, it means putting them in an environment where we're already, encouraging that stuff. And talking about it a lot. So, as they are, one thing we do at Fergus is that we embrace this thing of test early, test often. If anyone, did anyone attend Test Bash online last week? There was a couple. So there was a talk early on where Francis Ho talks about WOMing, works on my machine, which is like a peer testing where you peer test with the developer. And that's something we insist on early on, so they start to do this, thinking about what's happening early and in the context of the business. So making sure that we have a process in place where testers are invited early to stuff, where they're taught to think about business and not just test cases. It really, to me, the answer, I'll think on it some more, but to me the answer is making sure that environment's there so you're not just throwing them out there by themselves. Does that kind of answer your question? Find me at lunch.
Cool. We have another question down here. Yay.
I want to start beatboxing. Can you put it aside? Can you hear me if I yell?
I can hear you from there, yeah.
So I really like the analogy of cooking and thinking about pantry staples.
Yes.
What do you think are the staple ingredients for a good tester?
Yep. What are the staple ingredients for a good tester? So when I'm interviewing, the thing I look for the most is someone that holds an opinion and will express that opinion. I think that is probably the number one. That's the flower. What I really struggle with, I will give someone, show someone an example of an app that is questionable in terms of usability and ask for their opinion on it. And if they say, it's fine, it's good, I love it, that's a problem for me. I want some meatier feedback than that. Sure, you love it and tell me the things that are good about it, but I want some criticism and stuff as well. I think that's probably the number one thing I'm looking for. The stuff we've talked about in terms of business is another one. So, I think a staple is, being able to think beyond, has this passed or failed, and, to what does this mean for the person using it on the other side? Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions? Is there anyone further away that we could get it to? All right, here we go. It's teamwork. Oh no, it's come back to me. Where's Anna when you need her? All right. Oh gosh. Can you believe I was a bowler? Maybe I should. No. Oh. It went exactly where I meant it to go. Yes.
I'm really interested in the organization that you mentioned.
Yep.
Could you please give us a good example of the organization map and
Yep.
one of the most impressive organizational maps you've ever encountered? Thank you very much.
So what are some impressive organizational bugs I've encountered? Look, so when I started at Fergus, there were two things that really stood out, right? And one of them was that I've already talked about, was that the testers were sitting off by themselves and didn't really talk to anyone. In fact, they reported to our HR manager, which was like... the fun thing was I got to unpick that, right? And it's I'm really proud of the way that is now. They're in teams, they're collaborating with their engineers, all that sort of stuff. The other one is probably that we were delivering software on a weekly cadence. So every Thursday, all these engineers would merge stuff, and every Friday, we would fix all the incidents and ship all the hotfixes for all the problems that caused from that big merge. Plus a 3-hour regression test that sat on top of that. So in my first few months, the task was, okay, we need to get away from that. What's it going to take for us to be able to ship to production on demand? And it took about 2 weeks of work from our SRE team, and it meant a couple of days where people couldn't merge anything, and there was some nervousness around that. But now we release to production 2 or 3 times a day. We know exactly what's in each release, because it's no more than 1 or 2 tickets. We don't need to do this massive regression test because we know what's there. And we've already tested stuff locally. So that's probably the big one for me, is fixing that deploy cadence, and de-risking. It may not reduce the number of bugs necessarily. I think it does, but what it also means is that if bugs happen, they're really easy to remedy, and that period of time where there's a bug in production is greatly reduced, and a lot less people get impacted by it. Does that answer the question? Okay, all right. Whew.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you.
Another round of applause for James.